After drug trafficking, the illegal trade in animals is the most profitable criminal business in the world. Smugglers and dealers make an estimated $4 billion every year. Even if animals are intercepted by authorities, conservationists face the challenge of repatriating. Susan Yu discovered how state-of-the-art science is helping track down the animals' true homes.
For Hong Kong customs and conservationists, it was a nightmare of mammoth proportions. 10,000 live turtles, stacked on top of one another like hamburger patties, and crammed into 4 20-foot-long containers on their way to China.
I think right now we have two problems. The first one is the identification of wildlife, because very often our frontline staff, when they come across a wildlife shipment, they have to make that decision right at the spot as to whether a shipment of wildlife are actually endangered species or not.
In the case of the turtles, the authorities weren't sure.
Very often, even you have a correct permit or document, well, still you will come across with specimens that are not tallied with the document or the paper. Nowadays, we rely on information and intelligence. It appears that the illegal activities, they are now more organized and more underground.
As animal traffickers become more sophisticated, so too has the method in tracking down the place of origin for confiscated wildlife. Conservationists and now the Hong Kong government are turning to animals' genetic code, or DNA, to help with their detective work.
DNA could help to identify whether the animal concern or the wildlife concern is actually from the legal source.
In the case of the turtles, they were transferred to the Kadoorie Farm and Botanic Garden, a flora and fauna rescue center. Experts there identified 11 rare and endangered Asian turtle species. Most were from Malaysia and listed in CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. Is there any kind of DNA testing samples being taken from these turtles?
They've been sampled for all sorts of different purposes, partly to work towards getting sort of DNA fingerprints from them so that in future, if there's another confiscation, we begin to recognize where they come from.
That hasn't been easy for authorities and wildlife experts in Singapore and Hong Kong, Asia's major hubs for illegal animal trafficking. Dr. Gary Aids is the manager of the Kadoorie Rescue Center. He says some animals have even been microchipped to assist in species identification.
You don't have animals which you can just simply confiscate and then send them back to the wild eventually. You have animals which someone has to look at and identify and try to work out the history. Where did it come from? Which part of Asia did it originate?
But what do you do when the animals are from other continents?
Okay, this is a South American owl monkey, and it's an example of an exotic species which finds its way to the rescue centre here at Kadoorie Farm.
As experts try to find confiscated wildlife suitable homes, a DNA record is kept for many of them to maintain a head count of their kind. The information is vital since so many species appear to be so similar.
This animal is the pygmy loris, and it's actually related to the owl monkey from South America. In its habit is nocturnal, and it feeds on insects and fruit in the wild. But this is a Southeast Asian species, and we have about 16 of these in captivity at the moment. Also, we're doing some interesting work with these animals because in order to be able to send them back one day to the place where they originated, you have to do some DNA work and then compare that with future work which will be done with animals that are still in the wild.
And animal scientists are hoping that a global DNA network will mean important genetic information can be exchanged when it comes to identifying endangered wildlife.
Basically, either we would keep this information, or more likely, the people in this case, we're sending samples to Kunming in China, where someone a researcher there is finding out the DNA and keeping records. So there will be a database. That database could be kept on a web page somewhere.
The farm is home to over 1,000 birds, mammals, and reptiles. They represent over 100 species. Conservationists here admit it hasn't been easy treating and trying to resettle animals, let alone figuring out their DNA profile. But despite all of these challenges, they say there's hope. In the case of the 10,000 smuggled turtles, half died. But there's been a bright spot. Survivors have left their mark for their species' future. This highly endangered baby yellow-headed temple turtle is testimony of that.
Although we were trying to save a huge number, it wasn't possible to care for every single individual. So we were dealing with quite a lot of mortality. And although we managed to save over 4,000 turtles, which went to assurance colonies around the world, it was still sad to see many die. So it's nice to see an egg of one of those individuals which has survived.
Like these turtle eggs, mapping the DNA of animals is still in the embryonic stages. There are a handful of so-called DNA zoos in the world. Scientists in Cape Town have collected DNA samples from more than 50 species of animals. In San Diego, zoologists have more than 350 species on file. And in Asia, the Chinese Academy of Sciences in Shanghai has started its own database of local species.
The whole technique actually is quite a new one in the wildlife aspect. It's been developed for quite a long time, but as far as wildlife trade is concerned, it's still quite new.
No one is expecting the DNA banks to be a Noah's Ark, but they are proving to be a crucial tool in understanding the building blocks of an animal kingdom that is fast disappearing.